The doors of the Grand Council chamber weighed more than 1,000 tons each. They had been built from the compressed core of a dying star, forged in the heart of a neutron foundry, and inscribed with the names of 10,000 civilizations that had risen and fallen since the galaxy first learned to govern itself. Today, those doors opened for humanity. Ambassador Victor Kane stood at the threshold, flanked by 3 members of his diplomatic team. Behind him stretched a corridor of crystal and light that seemed to go on forever. Before him lay the greatest concentration of power in the known universe. The chamber was massive beyond comprehension. It stretched upward for nearly a kilometer, its walls lined with floating platforms where representatives of 800 alien species watched in absolute silence. Bioluminescent creatures from ocean worlds cast soft blue light across the space. Beings of pure energy flickered like living flames. Massive insectoid delegates clicked there, mandibles in patterns that their translators rendered as whispered prayers. And every single one of them was staring at the humans. Victor had prepared for this moment his entire life. He had studied every known species, memorized every protocol, learned every gesture that might be considered offensive or welcoming across 100 different cultures. But nothing could have prepared him for the weight of 800 civilizations watching him take his first step into their domain. "They are smaller than I expected," rumbled a voice from somewhere above. The translator in Victor's ear identified the speaker as Delegate Gorith of the Manthari Collective, a species of massive reptilian warriors who had conquered half a spiral arm before the council forced them to make peace. "Size means nothing," another voice replied. This one belonged to High Chancellor Vorn, the supreme leader of the Galactic Federation. He sat upon a floating throne at the chamber's center, his serpentine body coiled around itself like a living mountain. His scales shimmered with colors that had no names in human languages. The question is whether they are a threat. Victor reached the central platform and stopped precisely 3 meters from the Chancellor's throne. This was the prescribed distance for new species seeking audience. Any closer would be seen as aggression. Any farther would suggest weakness. "High Chancellor," Victor said, his voice carrying through the chamber's acoustic systems. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I thank you for this audience." Vorn's massive head lowered until his eyes were level with Victor's face. Each eye was the size of a small car, and the intelligence behind them was ancient and cold. "You have traveled far to reach us," the Chancellor said. 17 generations ago, your species had not yet learned to leave your atmosphere. Now you stand in the heart of galactic civilization. This is either remarkable progress or remarkable danger. The Council will determine which. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Victor had expected this. Humanity's rapid advancement had terrified the galaxy's established powers. Species that had taken millions of years to achieve interstellar travel viewed humanity's 3-century journey with deep suspicion. "We come in peace," Victor said. "We seek only to join the community of civilized worlds." Peace. The word came from a platform high above, spoken by a being that looked like a collection of floating crystals arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape. "The Varani archive contains records of your species, human. We have studied your transmissions for 2 centuries. Your history is soaked in blood. Your entertainment glorifies violence. Your religions speak of eternal warfare between good and evil. And you claim to come in peace?" Victor turned to face the speaker. "Ambassador Thrall of the Varani, I presume. Your reputation as a scholar precedes you." The crystalline being flickered with surprise. "You know my name?" "I know the names of every delegate in this chamber. I know your histories, your cultures, your fears and ambitions. Humanity may be young by your standards, but we are thorough." Victor paused. "And yes, our history contains violence. We do not deny this. But violence is not our purpose. It is merely our capability. Another murmur, louder this time. Chancellor Vorn raised one massive claw for silence. You speak boldly for a species that has no allies. Number fleet capable of matching our weakest member, and no leverage in these proceedings. Why should we not simply quarantine your world and forget you exist? Because you already tried that once, Victor said quietly. And it did not work. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Victor reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a data crystal. He held it up so that every delegate could see. 3 days ago, our archaeologists discovered something buried beneath the ice of our northern continent. A structure, alien in origin, 16,000 years old. He placed the crystal on the platform's scanning surface. It contained records of a species that visited Earth long before humanity built its first cities. Records of observations, experiments, and a final recommendation. The crystal's contents projected into the air above the platform. Ancient symbols filled the space, written in a language that made several delegates gasp in recognition. The Elder Script, Ambassador Thrall whispered. Impossible. The Elders vanished 12,000 years ago. Their records were sealed by the First Council. Sealed, Victor agreed, but not destroyed. And now we know why. Chancellor Vorm had gone very still. What do you know, human? Victor turned to face the entire chamber. His diplomatic team remained motionless behind him, their expressions carefully neutral. We know that the Elders studied humanity for 300 years. We know they classified Earth as a Category 7 world, unfit for contact. And we know they gave our planet a name in their ancient tongue, a name that was never supposed to be spoken again. What name? Someone demanded. Victor smiled. It was not a friendly expression. They called us the nursery of the Devourers. And according to these records, the Elders were so terrified of what we might become that they built an entire quarantine zone around our region of space, 3,000 light-years wide, specifically to keep us contained. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed demands in 100 languages. Military commanders reached for weapons that were not supposed to exist within council chambers. Religious leaders began chanting prayers to gods that humanity had never heard of. And through it all, Victor Kane stood perfectly still, watching the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy panic at the mention of his species' ancient name. We did not come here to threaten you, he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. We came here because the quarantine has failed. We have already spread beyond the boundaries your ancestors set. We have already made contact with 17 civilizations outside Federation space. He paused, letting the implications sink in. We came here to offer you a choice. You can accept us as allies, as partners, as fellow members of the galactic community. Or you can try to contain us again. His smile widened. But I should warn you, the Elders tried that 16,000 years ago. According to their own records, they believed we would destroy ourselves within a millennium. He gestured at himself, at his team, at the data crystal still projecting its ancient warnings into the air. They were wrong. And now we are here. The question is not whether humanity will join the galaxy. That has already happened. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us. Chancellor Vorn stared at the human ambassador for a long moment. Then he turned to his advisors and spoke a single word that the translator rendered as archives. Bring me every sealed record from the Elder period, the Chancellor commanded. I want to know exactly what our ancestors found on that planet, and I want to know what they were so afraid of. Victor nodded respectfully. That seems wise, Chancellor. But I should warn you. The truth may be more disturbing than the mystery. High above, in the observation galleries, a figure watched the proceedings with ancient eyes. She had waited 16,000 years for this moment. She had watched humanity crawl from caves to cities to starships, always wondering when they would finally remember what they truly were. The time had come. Earth's children had finally come home to the stars. And soon, the galaxy would learn why the elders had been so afraid. Soon, they would learn humanity's true name. The emergency session convened within the hour. Ambassador Threll of the Vorani had never seen the Council move so quickly. Emergency protocols that normally took days to activate had been bypassed in minutes. Delegates who had been bitter enemies for centuries now huddled together in frightened clusters, whispering theories about what the humans might truly be. The sealed archives had been opened for the first time in 12,000 years, and what they contained had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. High Chancellor Vorn sat upon his floating throne, but his usual composure had cracked. His scales had gone pale, shifting through colors that indicated deep distress. Before him, the chief archivist of the Federation stood trembling, clutching a collection of data crystals that predated every empire currently represented in the chamber. "Tell them," Vorn commanded. "Tell them what the elders documented." The chief archivist was a being called Morath. He belonged to a species that lived for 10,000 years and dedicated their existence to preserving knowledge. In all his centuries of service, he had never looked so terrified. The elders observed humanity for 300. "Dread in 12 standard years," Morath began, his voice barely above a whisper. "They documented everything. The biological studies alone fill 17 million data crystals. But the behavioral analysis is what concerned them most." He activated the projection system, and images filled the air above the chamber's central platform. Primitive humans hunting, building, warring against each other with crude weapons. At first, they classified humanity as a standard predator species. Aggressive, territorial, capable of basic tool use. Nothing unusual for a Category 7 world. Morath paused, but then they noticed something that changed everything. The projection shifted to show a group of early humans gathered around a fire. One of them was pointing at the stars. Humans began asking questions, Morath said. Not just about survival or mating or territory. They asked about the nature of the universe. They wondered what existed beyond their world. They created art and music and stories about things they had never seen. "Many species develop culture," Delegate Gareth rumbled. "This is not unusual." "No," Morath agreed. But the speed was unprecedented. The elders returned to Earth every 1,000 years to check on humanity's progress. Each time, they found advancement that should have taken 100,000 years compressed into a few. Generations, writing, mathematics, architecture, philosophy. Humanity was evolving mentally at a rate the elders had never witnessed in any species. Ambassador Victor Kane stood at the edge of the platform, watching the proceedings with calm interest. His diplomatic team had been moved to a secure observation area, but he had been permitted to remain. Threll suspected this was because the Council wanted to watch his reactions. So far, Kane had shown nothing but polite attention. The elders became concerned, Morath continued. They began more intensive studies. They observed human conflicts, human cooperation, human creativity. And they discovered something that terrified them. He activated another projection. This one showed a mathematical model, complex and beautiful, representing something that Threll did not immediately recognize. Humans possess a unique neurological trait, Morath explained. Your species calls it pattern recognition, but it is far more than that. The human brain is constantly, unconsciously analyzing its environment for threats and opportunities. It builds models of the future based on incomplete information. It imagines possibilities that do not yet exist and finds ways to make them real. We call it imagination, Kane said quietly. Every human child has it, yes. Morith's voice dropped even lower, and that is what terrified the elders. They realized that humanity would never stop advancing, never stop growing, never stop reaching for things beyond their grasp. Other species achieve civilization and settle into stability. Humanity treats every achievement as merely a stepping stone to something greater. Chancellor Vorn leaned forward. This explains the rapid development. It does not explain why they called Earth the nursery of the Devourers. Morith hesitated. His ancient hands trembled as he activated the final projection. The elders ran simulations, he said. Millions of them. They wanted to predict where humanity's growth would lead. And every simulation, without exception, reached the same conclusion. The projection showed a galaxy map. As the simulation played, dots of light began spreading from a single point. The location of Earth. Slowly at first, then faster, until the entire galaxy was covered. Within 50,000 years of achieving interstellar travel, humanity would expand to fill every habitable world in the galaxy. Within 100,000 years, they would begin modifying uninhabitable worlds to suit their needs. Within 500,000 years, the projection zoomed out, showing not just the galaxy, but the entire local cluster of galaxies. They would consume everything, Morith finished. Not through violence or conquest, but simply through growth. Through that endless drive to expand, to explore, to transform. The elders called them devourers because humanity devours potential. Every resource, every world, every idea that humanity touches becomes fuel for their advancement. The chamber was silent. Kane stepped forward. May I respond? Chancellor Vorn nodded slowly. Everything the archivist has said is accurate, Kane began. Humanity does possess these traits. We are driven to grow, to explore, to transform our environment. We cannot help it. It is written into our biology, our psychology, our very souls. He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. But the elders made a critical error in their analysis. They assumed that humanity's drive to consume was purely selfish. They thought we would expand for our own benefit alone, crushing anything in our path. Kane reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small object. It looked like a flower, preserved in crystal. This is a stellar orchid from the Vega system. It was the last of its kind, driven to extinction by a solar flare 3,000 years ago. He held it up. One of our deep space probes found it drifting in the debris field and brought it home. Our scientists spent 2 centuries developing the technology to clone it from the preserved genetic material. He set the flower on the projection platform. Today, there are 17 billion stellar orchids growing on 14 different worlds. We did not save them because they were useful. We saved them because they were beautiful and they deserved to exist. Thrall found himself moving closer, fascinated despite his fear. Humanity does devour, Kane continued. But we do not consume to destroy. We consume to preserve, to expand, to share. The elders saw a species that would spread across the galaxy. They were right, but they did not understand that everywhere we spread, we bring everything we have learned, everything we have saved, everything we have become. He looked directly at Chancellor Vorn. The true name of Earth is not the nursery of the Devourers. That was the elders' fear speaking. The true name, the name they were too afraid to record, is the cradle of the inheritors. Because humanity does not destroy civilizations. He smiled, and something ancient flickered behind his eyes. We inherit them. We preserve their knowledge, their art, their memory. And we carry them forward into a future they could never have reached alone. Before anyone could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. Unidentified vessels emerging from hyperspace, a security officer announced. 17 contacts. Energy signatures do not match any known species. Kane's expression did not change. Ah, they are early. Chancellor Vorn's head whipped toward him. You knew this would happen? We knew something would happen, Kane replied calmly. The quarantine zone did not just keep us in, Chancellor. It kept something else out. And now that we have breached it, he turned toward the observation windows, where dark shapes were beginning to emerge from the void. Now, the things the elders were really afraid of know that we are here. The station shuddered as the first weapon's fire struck the shields, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something ancient had finally found its prey. The emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson as the station shook again. Ambassador Threll watched chaos engulf the council chamber. Delegates scrambled for exits that were already jammed with panicking staff. Military commanders shouted contradictory orders into communication devices. Chancellor Vorn bellowed for calm, but his voice was lost in the thunder of weapons fire striking the station's shields. Only the humans remained still. Ambassador Kane stood at the observation window, watching the approaching enemy with an expression that Threll could not read. It might have been fear. It might have been anticipation. It might have been something else entirely. What are they? Threll demanded, joining the human at the window. The vessels that had emerged from hyperspace were unlike anything in the Federation's database. They looked organic, grown rather than built, their hulls covered in what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with sickly green light. Each one was massive, easily 10 times the size of the largest Federation warship, and behind them, something even larger was beginning to emerge from the void. The eternal hunger, Kane said quietly. A hive mind species that originated in the galactic core. They have been expanding outward for approximately 30,000 years, consuming every civilization in their path. Impossible. Threll's crystalline form flickered with distress. The Federation would have detected them. The Federation has been looking in the wrong direction. The quarantine zone did not just isolate Earth. It blocked the primary approach vector from the core. When we breached it, we created a hole in the galaxy's only defense. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Shields at 60%, an automated voice announced. Evacuation protocols initiated. Chancellor Vorn finally reached the window platform, his massive body displacing several smaller delegates who had frozen in terror. You knew about this threat. You knew, and you said nothing. We said plenty, Kane replied calmly. We have been sending warnings to Federation space for 2 centuries. Your listening posts dismissed them as background radiation. Why did you not make direct contact? We tried. Your quarantine patrols destroyed every probe we sent. Kane finally turned to face the Chancellor. Humanity has been fighting the eternal hunger for 300 years. We have lost 47 colony worlds and approximately 12 billion people. We came to the Council not to threaten you, but to warn you, and to offer our help. Through the window, the largest structure finished emerging from hyperspace. It was not a ship. It was something far worse. That is a consumption sphere, Kane said. A mobile harvesting platform designed to strip entire planets of biological matter. Population, approximately 4 billion individual organisms. It can process a world the size of Earth in 72 hours. Threll felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Pure, primal terror. We cannot fight that, he whispered. Our entire fleet could not scratch that thing. Your fleet cannot, Kane agreed. But we did not come alone. He raised his wrist and spoke into a communication device. Captain Reyes, this is Kane. Execute Protocol 7. Confirmed, Ambassador, a voice replied. Deployment in 30 seconds. Chancellor Vorn grabbed Kane's arm with enough force to crush steel. What are you doing? Kane did not flinch. Saving your civilization. You may want to step back from the window. Outside, something new appeared. A single vessel, small compared to the enemy fleet, decloaking directly between the station and the approaching swarm. It was sleek, dark, and utterly unremarkable. One ship? Delegate Goref had joined them at the window, his massive reptilian form trembling with barely contained rage. "You send one ship against that?" "We are not sending a ship," Kane said. "We are sending a warden." The human vessel began to glow. The light intensified, became blinding, and then something impossible happened. The ship unfolded. There was no other word for it. The vessel seemed to turn itself inside out, expanding in ways that violated every law of physics Threll had ever learned. Tendrils of pure energy extended outward, growing and growing until they eclipsed the enemy fleet entirely. "What is that?" Someone screamed. Kane watched the transformation with something like reverence. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She was a schoolteacher from a small town in South America. She volunteered for the Warden program after the eternal hunger destroyed her home colony. The energy form that had been Elena Vasquez reached toward the nearest enemy warship. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist, its molecules scattered across 1,000 kilometers of space in an instant. "The elders were right about one thing," Kane continued. "Humanity does devour, but we learn to direct that hunger, to focus it, to weaponize it." A second warship vanished, then a third. The energy form moved through the enemy fleet like a farmer harvesting wheat, each gesture erasing another vessel from existence. "The Warden program was created 200 years ago," Kane explained. "We found volunteers willing to sacrifice their physical forms for something greater. Their consciousness was merged with our most advanced technology, creating beings capable of manipulating energy at the molecular level. They are weapons," Chancellor Vorn said slowly. "They are protectors. 12 of them exist. 12 humans who gave up everything they were to become guardians of everything we care about." Kane paused. Elena Vasquez did not become a weapon because she wanted to destroy. She became a weapon because she never wanted another child to lose their home the way she did. The consumption sphere had begun to move, trying to retreat back into hyperspace. But the Warden was faster. The energy form expanded further, wrapping around the massive structure, like a parent cradling a child, and then it began to squeeze. The psychic scream that followed was felt by every being in the station. 4 billion voices crying out in terror as their hive mind realized it was about to die. Threll collapsed to his knees, his crystalline structure vibrating with the force of that collective agony. It lasted only seconds. When it was over, the consumption sphere was gone. The enemy fleet was gone. The Warden hung in space for a moment, her energy form flickering like a candle in the wind. And then she folded back into her ship and went still. The chamber was silent except for the sound of delegates weeping. Kane turned to face them. His expression had not changed throughout the battle. "Humanity does not want war," he said. "We have seen too much of it, lost too much to it. But when something threatens what we love, we become something else. Something the elders glimpsed in their studies. Something they called devourers, because they could not imagine any other word for it." He walked to the center of the platform. "The eternal hunger has been watching this region of space for 10,000 years, waiting for the quarantine to fail. Now it has. They will send more ships, larger fleets. Eventually, they will commit their full force to consuming everything in this sector." Chancellor Vorn found his voice. "How do we stop them?" Kane smiled. It was tired, sad, and absolutely determined. "You do not stop them. We do. But we need time to prepare. We need resources. We need allies who understand what is coming and are willing to fight beside us." He looked around the chamber. The question is not whether humanity will save this galaxy. That has already been decided. The question is whether you want to help, or whether you want to hide behind us while we do the dying. Before anyone could answer, the warden's ship reactivated and moved toward the station's docking bay. "Elena needs medical attention," Kane said. "Using that much power takes a toll, even on a warden. I suggest you prepare your best facilities. She deserves your hospitality after what she just did." He began walking toward the exit. "Ambassador Kane," Chancellor Vorn called after him. "The Council has not dismissed you." Kane paused at the door. "With respect, Chancellor, the Council's authority ended the moment those ships appeared. This is no longer a political discussion. This is a war for survival." He smiled one last time. "Welcome to humanity's reality. Try to keep up." The doors closed behind him, leaving the galaxy's most powerful leaders staring at each other in terrified silence. And far away, in the darkness between stars, the eternal hunger began gathering its true army. The first battle was over. The war had just begun. 3 days had passed since the battle. "Ambassador," Threll stood in the medical bay of the Council station, watching the impossible woman who had saved them all. Elena Vasquez lay in a suspension field, her body connected to machines that the Federation's doctors could barely understand. She looked small and fragile, nothing like the cosmic entity that had erased an entire invasion fleet. "She is stable," said the human physician attending her. His name tag identified him as Dr. Marcus Webb. "The transformation takes enormous energy. She needs time to recover." "How long?" Threll asked. "Days, perhaps weeks. Each deployment costs her something permanent." Webb checked the readings on his equipment. The human body was never meant to contain this much power. The wardens burn through themselves every time they fight. Then why do they volunteer? Webb looked at Threll with tired eyes. "Because someone has to. And because they remember what happens when no one does." The door opened and Ambassador Kane entered, followed by Chancellor Vorn and several council delegates. The emergency sessions had continued almost without break since the attack, and everyone looked exhausted. "The scouts have returned," Kane announced. "The news is not good." He activated a holographic display showing the surrounding space. Red dots marked enemy positions, spreading across the map like a disease. The eternal hunger has established 17 staging areas within striking distance of Federation space. Their main fleet is gathering at the galactic core. Total estimated force: approximately 900,000 vessels and 12 consumption spheres. Delegate Gorath made a sound that the translators rendered as a curse. 900,000? We have perhaps 50,000 warships across the entire Federation, which is why we need a new strategy. Kane gestured to expand the display. The wardens can handle individual fleets, but there are only 12 of them. They cannot be everywhere at once. We need to buy time while we prepare a more permanent solution. Chancellor Vorn coiled his body tighter around his floating throne. In the days since the battle, he had aged visibly. The stress of learning that everything he believed about galactic safety was a lie had taken its toll. "What solution?" he asked. "You have shown us that the eternal hunger can be destroyed. But if your wardens cannot defeat their full force, what can?" Kane was silent for a moment. Then he looked at Elena Vasquez, still unconscious in her suspension field. "The Warden program was created as a response to a specific threat," he said slowly. 12 volunteers, transformed into weapons capable of fighting the hunger on equal terms. But it was always meant to be temporary. A bridge until we could develop something better. And have you? We have been working on it for 200 years. Kane turned back to the display. The problem with the Wardens is that they are reactive. They respond to threats after those threats appear. What we need is something proactive. something that can strike at the hunger's source before it can mobilize against us. He pulled up new data, showing something that made Threll's crystalline form pulse with confusion. It appeared to be a star system, but the star at its center was wrong. Its light was too pure, too focused, and it seemed to be artificial. Humanity has always been good at building things, Kane continued. Weapons, tools, cities, civilizations. But our greatest achievement is not any physical structure. It is our ability to work together toward impossible goals. What is that? Vorn demanded, pointing at the artificial star. We call it the beacon. It took us 150 years to construct. 20 billion humans contributed to its creation. Every scientist, every engineer, every worker we could spare was dedicated to this single project. Kane's voice dropped lower. The beacon is a weapon designed specifically to destroy hive mind species. It broadcasts a signal that disrupts the neural connections that hold collective consciousnesses together. Against an individual mind, it does nothing. Against the eternal hunger, it causes their entire civilization to experience simultaneous ego death. The chamber was silent. You built a device that can kill quadrillions of beings with a single activation? Threll whispered, double quotes, yes. Kane did not flinch from the horror in Threll's voice. And I will not pretend we are proud of it. But the alternative was extinction. Ours, yours, everyone's. The eternal hunger does not negotiate. It does not coexist. It consumes. Given the choice between building a weapon of genocide and watching everything we love be devoured, we chose to build the weapon. Chancellor Vorn uncurled slightly from his throne. If you have this weapon, why have you not used it? Because the beacon requires a specific condition to function. It must be positioned at the exact center of the hunger's neural network, the point where all their minds converge. That point is located at the galactic core, surrounded by their entire civilization. Kane pulled up tactical projections showing the impossibility of the task. To reach it, we would need to punch through 900,000 warships, 12 consumption spheres, and defensive networks that make your most fortified stations look like children's toys. The wardens could clear a path, but even all 12 of them working together could not survive that assault long enough to deliver the beacon. Then, what is your plan? Goreth demanded. The original plan was to wait, build up our forces over centuries until we had enough strength to make the final push. But the quarantine breach changed everything. The hunger knows we exist now. They will not give us centuries to prepare. They will come for us within years. Months, perhaps. Kane looked around the chamber. That is why we came to the council. Not because we need your ships, though we will accept any you can offer. Not because we need your technology, though your contributions would be welcome. We came because we need something that only the Federation can provide. What? Vorn asked. Kane pointed at the map, at the thousands of worlds represented by the council delegates. Pilots, soldiers, volunteers willing to join humanity's war, not because they owe us anything, but because they understand what is at stake. The beacon requires a delivery team. That team needs to be large enough to absorb losses that would destroy any normal fleet. We estimate minimum requirements of approximately 10 million personnel. The number hung in the air, like a death sentence. 10 million beings, Threll said slowly. You are asking us to send 10 million of our people on a mission that you yourself admit may be suicide. I am asking you to send 10 million volunteers to save a galaxy, Kane corrected. Yes, many of them will die. Perhaps most of them. But if we succeed, every civilization in the Council will survive. Every child born for the next million years will owe their existence to the beings who made that sacrifice. He paused. Humanity will contribute 5 million of our own people. We will lead the assault. We will absorb the worst of the casualties. But we cannot do this alone. We need partners. We need allies. We need the galaxy to finally stop being afraid of us and start fighting beside us. Chancellor Vorn was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to address the assembled delegates. This council has stood for 12,000 years. We have survived wars, plagues, and catastrophes that should have ended us. We have done this by working together, by setting aside our differences for the common good. He paused. Today, we face a threat greater than anything in our history. And for the first time, we have allies who understand how to fight it. He turned back to Kane. The Vorani will contribute 1 million volunteers. Ambassador Thrall said immediately. Delegate Gorth rumbled his agreement. The Manthari Collective will match that number. Perhaps more. One by one, other delegates began calling out their commitments. 500,000 here. 200,000 there. Numbers that had seemed impossible minutes ago suddenly appeared within reach. Kane watched it happen with an expression that might have been gratitude in the suspension field behind them. Elena Vasquez's eyes opened. Ambassador, she said weakly, I can feel them gathering. The hunger. They are preparing something big. Something worse than anything we have seen. Kane moved to her side. How much time do we have? Days, maybe less. They felt me destroy their fleet. They know what we are now. She gripped his arm with surprising strength. They are terrified, Victor. For the first time in 30,000 years, the eternal hunger is afraid. And that makes them more dangerous than ever. Kane turned to face the council. You heard her. We do not have the luxury of preparation. We need to move now, with whatever forces we can gather. He looked at each delegate in turn. The question is simple. Are you ready to fight for everything you have ever known? Chancellor Vorn rose from his throne for the first time since the emergency began. The Federation stands with humanity, he declared. Let the eternal hunger learn what happens when the galaxy finally stops running. The chamber erupted in cheers that echoed through the station's corridors, and in the darkness between stars, the hunger felt something it had not experienced in millennia. The devourers were coming for them. And for the first time, the hunger was not certain. It would survive. The fleet that gathered. At the edge of Federation space was the largest assembly of military power in galactic history. 12 million vessels. From 400 different species hung in. Formation around the human flagship, the Inheritance. Warships built by civilizations that had been enemies for millennia now flew wing to wing. Their crews united by a purpose greater than any ancient grudge. Ambassador Thrall stood on the Inheritance's observation deck, watching the impossible sight. Beside him, Ambassador Kane and the recovered Elena Vasquez waited in silence. I never thought I would see this, Thrall admitted. The Vorani and the Manthari fighting together. The Collective and the Alliance sharing tactical data. Species that refused to acknowledge each other's existence, now coordinating assault patterns. Fear is a powerful motivator, Kane said. But so is hope. You came together because you finally believe you can win. Can we? Kane smiled. Ask me again after the battle. The fleet's communication system crackled to life. Chancellor Vorn's voice filled every vessel, translated into 1,000 different languages. Warriors of the Galactic Alliance. Today we begin a journey that will decide the fate of every civilization in existence. Our enemy has consumed countless worlds and considers itself invincible. We will prove them wrong. He paused. Humanity has asked us to trust them. They have asked us to follow them into the heart of darkness, against an enemy they have fought alone for 3 centuries. Today, we answer that call. Today, we stand together. Today, we fight as one. The fleet began to move, jumping into hyperspace in perfect synchronization. The journey to the galactic core took 7 days. 7 days of final preparations, of soldiers writing letters to families they might never see again, of commanders reviewing plans that everyone knew would not survive contact with the enemy. Elena Vasquez spent those days in meditation, preparing herself for what would come. The other 11 wardens had already departed, spreading out to create diversions that would draw the Hunger's attention away from the main assault. "You do not have to do this," Kane told her on the final day. "We have other volunteers. You have already given more than anyone could ask, and I will give more still." Alana's eyes glowed faintly with the power contained within her transformed body. "I was a teacher, Victor. I spent 30 years helping children understand their place in the universe. This is the same thing on a larger scale. Teaching the eternal hunger a lesson. Teaching the galaxy that it does not have to be afraid." She smiled. "The elders called us devourers because they saw our hunger for growth, for expansion, for consumption. They were wrong. We do not devour because we want to destroy. We devour because we want to protect. Every world we claim, every resource we gather, every advancement we make, it is all for the same purpose: to ensure that what we love can never be taken from us." The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Hunger's territory. What awaited them was beyond anything the tactical projections had predicted. Not 900,000 ships, but over 2 million. Not 12 consumption spheres, but 30. The entire might of the eternal hunger had gathered to defend its heart. For a moment, doubt flickered through the allied fleet. Not then the wardens attacked. All 12 of them, striking simultaneously at different points across the enemy formation. Space itself seemed to tear apart as beings of pure energy carved paths through the Hunger's defenses. Ships vanished by the thousands. Consumption spheres collapsed into themselves. And for the first time in their existence, the eternal hunger felt what it meant to be prey. The allied fleet surged forward through the openings the wardens had created. Battles erupted across a front spanning light years, violence on a scale that defied comprehension. Ships died by the hundreds every second, their crews sacrificing themselves to push ever closer to the galactic core. Threll fought alongside the Inheritance's tactical team, coordinating Varani vessels and maneuvers he had trained for his entire life, but never expected to use. Around him, humans and aliens worked in desperate harmony, their differences forgotten in the face of extinction. Beacon deployment in 90 seconds. Someone announced through the observation windows. Threll could see their destination. The heart of the eternal hunger, a vast neural nexus where quadrillions of minds converged into a single terrible consciousness. It pulsed with malevolent light, reaching out with psychic tendrils that tried to consume every being that approached. The wardens had formed a protective sphere around the Inheritance, their combined power holding back attacks that would have vaporized continents. But even they were weakening, their energy reserves draining with every passing moment. "We are not going to make it," Gorath growled from his position at the weapons console. "The wardens cannot hold much longer." Kane did not respond. He was watching Elena through the observation window. She hung in space at the sphere's leading edge, her energy form flickering and fading as she absorbed attack after attack. "Elena," he said through their private channel, "it is too much. Fall back." Her response came as a whisper in his mind. "I was a teacher, Victor, and today I teach my final lesson." She released the other wardens from the formation and flew toward the neural nexus alone. The Hunger's response was immediate and overwhelming. Every weapon, every ship, every fragment of its vast consciousness turned toward the single human flying into its heart. Attacks that could sterilize planets struck her from every direction. She did not stop. "What is she doing?" Threll demanded. "She is clearing the path." Kane's voice was barely audible. The beacon needs to reach the exact center of the nexus. She is making sure it gets there. Elena Vasquez had burned brighter than any warden in history. Now she burned one final time, converting her entire being into a shield that protected the inheritance as it made its final approach. Beacon deployment in 10 seconds. The neural nexus loomed ahead, vast and terrible and hungry. Threll could feel its consciousness pressing against his mind, trying to consume him even at this distance. 5 seconds. Elena's light was fading. Her form had grown thin, transparent, barely visible against the fury of the attacks she was absorbing. Deployment. The beacon activated. There was no explosion. No dramatic wave of destruction. The signal simply spread outward from the inheritance at the speed of light, passing through the neural nexus like water, through sand. And the eternal hunger died. It did not die screaming or fighting. It simply stopped. Quadrillions of individual organisms, suddenly freed from the hive mind that had controlled them for 30,000 years, drifted in confused silence. The attacks ceased. The warships went dark. The consumption spheres fell dormant. The war was over. In the aftermath, as medical ships rushed to treat the wounded and rescue vessels searched for survivors, Threll found Kane standing alone at the observation window. "She is gone," Kane said quietly. "Elena, she gave everything to get us here. She will be remembered. Yes, along with the 8 million others who died today." Kane turned to face Threll. "This is what the elders never understood. They called us devourers because they saw our capacity for destruction. But destruction was never our purpose. It was just a tool, a means to an end. And what is the end?" Kane looked out at the drifting remnants of the eternal hunger, at the Allied fleet beginning the long process of rescue and recovery, at the stars that had been threatened by extinction and were now safe. Preservation, protection, inheritance. He smiled sadly. The elders called Earth the nursery of the devourers. They were wrong. Earth is the cradle of protectors. We do not consume civilizations. We inherit them. We preserve their knowledge, their art, their children. And when something threatens what we have inherited," he paused, "we become whatever we need to be to protect it. Even if that means becoming monsters in the eyes of those we are saving." The cleanup took months. The reorganization of galactic politics took years. But eventually, a new order emerged, one built on the foundations that humanity and its allies had established in the fires of war. The Galactic Federation became the Galactic Alliance, with humanity as one of its founding members. The quarantine zone was dismantled. The secrets of the elders were made public, their fears exposed as the misunderstandings they had always been. And on the anniversary of the battle, a monument was dedicated at the galactic core. A simple structure, listing the names of everyone who had died to end the eternal hunger. At its center stood a statue of a human woman with her arms outstretched, as if embracing the entire galaxy. The inscription read simply, "Elena Vasquez, Teacher." Below it, in the ancient script of the elders, was a single phrase that Threll had spent months learning to translate. It did not say, "Nursery of the Devour," as it said Cradle of the Guardians. As the galaxy moved forward into a future that had been purchased with so much sacrifice, that phrase became more than just a monument inscription. It became a promise. Humanity would always protect what it loved. No matter the cost. No matter the enemy. No matter how the rest of the universe chose to see them. The Guardians had awakened. And the darkness would never threaten unchallenged again.